okay, I guess first question is, who did see the Zoom? Right, okay.
I did.
You did or
Did. Awesome, okay, good. I was
I
hoping
did a
everybody,
long
there would
time
be at
ago.
least somebody that hadn't.
Okay.
Well, you got us.
All right, so I'll kind of start at the start then. Shrink plastic, anybody familiar with shrinky dinks?
Yes.
From like the 80s and that time? It's essentially shrinky dinks for adults. Instead of coming on a nice sheet of paper where you color it in, cut it out, and then make it, it comes as just a blank sheet, essentially. This is Grafix, Grafix. They do several different varieties. This is the only sanded one, pre-sanded one that they make. So it's just clear with sandpaper, essentially. But they do make several colors that are either for ink or inkjet printable that could probably be sanded and used for color pencil. I haven't tried it myself. It's on my to-do list. But they come as, just a one size 8.5 by 11. I haven't found them to make any bigger or smaller or other sizes. But the fun part is once it's done, it's about a little less than a quarter of the size of the original. So you can draw really nice and big, and what you draw always looks a little pale and faded, but once you shrink it, all of that color sucks in. All of your little lines become tiny lines, all of your little details become tiny details, and everything looks like you just spent hours with a microscope doing tiny itty bitty little lines where you went, no. So it's kind of fun that way in that it can make a somewhat sloppy drawing look really, really good. So about the only negative part is the shrinking. It is not always the most, unlike a piece of watercolor paper where you can wet it, you kind of know what it's going to do. You're not always sure what it's going to do. Ideally, it shrinks down, it flattens out, everything goes well. Sometimes it curls, sometimes it gets a hole, sometimes it sticks to itself. Sometimes you'll spend hours drawing this and then it does that and you just want to throw it against the wall. And you start over again. So it's not the most predictable surface, but I found that kind of makes it fun for me. Watching it shrink makes me feel like 5 years old watching it. So I always turn the light on in the oven and stare at it, see what's doing, and watch in nervous excitement going, okay, it's done this, is it gonna do that again? Because it always curls up or bubbles up and then flattens back out again. Once it doesn't stick to itself. I tend to use, you can use an oven. I've got, on the table back there, I've got the instructions but it comes with the paper or plastic too. I tend to use an oven just because it's a larger, kind of more even heat distribution. You can use a heat gun, although you really have to be constantly in motion. If you pause, it will bubble up and it'll sometimes burn a hole in it pretty quick. So everybody that saw the Zoom meeting saw that happen. So I really don't like the heat gun if I can avoid it. Toaster oven works, although I found I have to put another piece on top just because there's so little distance between the plastic and the heat source that when it does the curl, it likes to touch that, put a hole in it, and then flatten back out or overheat quick. So, and you can only fit about a half a sheet in a toaster oven. So, for when we get to playing around, I have half sheets so that you can't draw something and we can shrink it here, so you can kind of see.
So we can take them home then,
Oh, yeah.
and shrink them at home, and
Oh,
then
yeah.
mail them to whoever's going to convention or something like
bring
that.
them in May
Yep, or bring them in May. Yeah,
from Iowa.
I have.
No,
I have several.
sometime
sheets.
before
Why?
July.
Yeah, okay.
End of July, we'll get it from you.
I definitely.
And yeah, I brought. I was saying I have a 50-pack here. I have another 50-pack at home. Please take more than one. Please take 10, because then I'll be down to just one pack of 50. Because I couldn't find my first pack of 50, so I bought a second one.
Oh.
And then I found the first pack, and I went, I don't think I'm really
good.
going to do 100 of these, but okay. So yeah, I kind of started out. Grafix did like a little contest essentially. It was draw on this plastic and show us what you do. And so I did little Robin. I was like, that's kind of cool. Okay. So I started playing with some of the printable ones. Like these are actually the inkjet printable. These are just old pictures of mine that I printed out on it. But they're good examples of they don't shrink square either. You will wind up with kind of edges. So when you're drawing on it, take that into consideration, that you'll have to either mat it a little different, and you don't want to try to draw something that's geometric, that you need to have those perfect corners, because it's not going to stay that way most of the time. Every now and then you'll get lucky. Most of the time, you're going to wind up with this. Like, that was a square corner, now it's a kind of angle corner, just the way that it shrunk. For me, what I do is once I'm done with the piece, I map out kind of what 90-degree corners would be, and I have a belt sander in my basement. I just go down to the belt sander and I sand it to just get it down to those corners. Sometimes I'll round the corners if I'm feeling particularly adventurous. But belt sander works nice. You could probably hand sand it, but it would take a while. You can cut it afterwards, but it does take some work.
Could it snap or break?
It can, yeah. In fact, I'll just, oops. It's plastic. It's flexible plastic.
Whoa.
But it doesn't break. I wasn't expecting it to quite fly apart like that.
Safety glasses.
Yeah. Sorry, you're all in the fracture zone here.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's plastic. So if you cut it too much, if you bend it too much, it will fly apart, apparently. I've done that before and it just breaks in half. That's the first time I've had it shatter into pieces. But yeah, it will break. So using saws, sandpaper, something that's not putting a stressor on it is better. Yeah. You know, going back to the color side of things, like I said, when you put the color on, it's going to look pale. So I made two kind of examples. So this is all the polychromos. I just divided it up by light fast rating, just so that I could kind of see which colors were which. But they're almost pastel looking when you have it on here. Once you shrink it, that pastel goes away. And it gets much smaller, but it gets much more intense too. So you can't always judge what your colors are going to do based on what they look like. So having something like this, just taking a sheet and making a guide for whatever pencils you use most. I have, this one's my polychromos, I have one for Prismacolor. I just got some Derwent metallics. Metallics are a lot of fun on it, at least the Prismacolor ones that I've done, they get a sparkle to them. And they go back to looking like the pencil itself. They get that really nice sparkle. So I'm kind of excited to see if all of the colors of Derwent do that as well, or if it's just happens to be those two.
Did you do a sheet of this?
I haven't done the sheet of the sparkle ones, but I do, yeah. The two, this one's got rubbed a little bit, so it's not as sparkly as it was, but the gold and silver Prismacolor are on here, which is another thing. If you don't spray it, it does rub off because it's a slick plastic.
Mm-hmm.
So being careful too when I use just a regular fixative to spray afterwards. If you touch it before it's dry, the fixative will come off with your finger and you'll lose that spot.
Oh.
You can touch up after it's been shrunk, but the color will look different because when it shrinks, it's pulling that color into the plastic. When you touch up, you're putting that color on top of the plastic. So you get almost like a little bit of a layer and a little bit different shift in the color. So while it can be done, try to keep it to small areas that can be easily hidden if you need to. Because this is clear, the colors also shift depending on what you put behind them. So I will do pieces and I'll put it on like different colors of paper, browns, whites, grays, depending on what I want it to do. So Put it on a black sheet, all of your dark colors seem to get darker. On a light sheet, they lose a little bit of that, your light colors stand out more. It's a little bit variable, so I usually have a bunch of different colors of various papers, pieces I've used for different things, and I'll set the piece on different colors and see, okay, if I do this, then my shadows really show up, but I lose all my highlights. Okay, if I put it on the light, my highlights really show up, but my shadows kind of get muddy looking. Midtones are most of what I use.
And that's
seems
for
to
when you're
balance.
framing it?
Correct. Yep, once it's shrunk, because if you don't put something behind it, because it is so see-through, you will see your matting or your what's a good word for it?
Just your backing board?
Backing board, yeah. You'll see through it. Whatever you use to adhere it to the board, you'll see that. Even if it's just like a little piece of double stick tape, it's enough to pull that backing board forward that it'll show a little bit through. So I learned my lesson there. I put something behind it for each one.
Do you adhere it, like use like a spray adhesive or something like that to put it onto the paper and then?
I'll either use a spray adhesive or I will use some pieces of double stick tape, but I will make them wide swaths.
Okay.
When it's just little pieces, it seems to show up more. If I can make it bigger, then it blends it better.
Oh.
It's not quite as noticeable. Either one. Some things you can do, different techniques I've kind of played with. I started out just using plain pencil. I didn't try to blend anything. I didn't try to remove or move or erase or anything. I was just seeing what it would do. Started playing though with some of the blending techniques. You can use the just the regular paper stumps, and they blend very nicely and can make some soft edges. So I'll pass these around. I tried to see if I could do puzzle pieces and puzzle things together to make bigger pieces. One of the things I learned is apparently when I do this, I can shrink half of the puzzle just fine. The other half does not go well, so these are actually two separate attempts. That's why they don't fit together at all. But you can kind of see, especially on this one, I intentionally, I used the burnisher on half of it and left the other half. This one I burnished all the background and then left the twiddly abstract thingies. Watching TV and doodling. But you can kind of see the difference between when you burnish and when you don't. Because all of those marks do show up. So each little pencil line, if you're trying to have it smooth, smooth it. Otherwise you will see every tiny little line. It does, well, it sucks in, it doesn't necessarily smooth it out.
And
it
so
just makes it more dramatic.
On this one here, it's a little bit more even. What did you do differently here than?
This one is completely burnished. I did all of that in burnish. This one, just the one half is burnished, the other half is not. As for when things do go badly, for those that saw the Zoom meeting, this was the one that became a potato chip. And I put it back in the oven and flattened it back out. And it did better than I thought it would. But you can, I'll pass this one around too. You can still tell where the hole was. There's wrinkles. It got better than I thought, but it wouldn't be something that it'd go in the oops pile. Just keep going from this direction.
Right. Is this the one that got the hole in it too? It looks like you burned it. Right?
Yep, that's the one that got a hole in it. It stuck to itself a little bit. I yelled at it.
Still pretty good.
Yeah, I mean, if it wasn't for the one that's right on the bird, I probably would just smooth it out and could work around that. I made this one just to play with the color and kind of blending colors as well. So the background, I blend each color together throughout the pad of the paw. This is a design I use for a lot of things because it has lots of detail, so I can play with it and do different things. But the background, I started with black around the paw and then just worked out with warm grays and then blended them together. So you can kind of see the smoother transition versus, you know, on that other piece where you had to, where you could see all the different lines. Erasing, you can use a regular eraser, but it does make the area smooth. It actually pushes that wax in. So pass this around, because this is, as I was making my Prismacolor example, I had one spot where instead of paying attention, I was watching TV and I tried to color the wrong one, and so I was like, oh, I gotta fix that, so I erased a little corner, and it comes out, those on looking at it, so you can kind of see it comes out a little lighter, and that's where I just erased and then tried to color the same thing over top. I have since then used like some mineral spirits, and that'll just wipes it right off. And then you can also resand those areas. All of the stuff I've done, I haven't added any sanding to the paper, plastic, but you can go back with a piece of sandpaper, really fine grit, if you wanted to get rid of some of it. I kind of like kind of the little loops and lines that show up a little bit, just as its own variation.
It's kind of nice to see the artist's hand in things.
Yeah.
I think that's not
Yeah,
always
it's
something
a little
that
bit
you
of
see.
it's what the paper does. So I'll pass that run around just because it's a good example with the before and after.
Which is the front side? Dull or shiny?
The dull side is the front side.
Front side.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Though that said, you can put them either direction because it is clear, it does show through.
Right. And you said this is encased in there and you can rub it?
If you scratch, it will come
Come
off.
off.
Yeah, once it's in there, but not permanent. So yeah, if you scratch it, it'll come off. Some areas, if you have like an area of dark and you accidentally scratch it, it will show up light, and it's hard to get that back down to the same effect.
How big can you buy the sheets?
Unfortunately, this is how big you can buy the sheets.
That's all? Okay.
Yeah, this is as big as they come, so that's as big as they wind up, all done. So I was kind of playing with puzzle idea and seeing if I could stick pieces together.
Yeah.
Again, because it's clear, this is actually the same picture that I did, the bird that I passed around there off of. This is going to be bird 2.0 because I want to do it again without paper.
It's a wonderful bird.
That is your bird?
Yep, this is my bird. This is AO. Or actually, now that Marvel has come out, apparently it's pronounced IO, and I never knew that.
He's amazing.
It's-
He really is.
He'll answer to what you call him, right?
She doesn't answer to anything.
She.
Yeah. But I'll tend to do this where I actually use just a curl of tape and I stick it to the back of the plastic, because then I can work right on top. I always do keep a piece of light paper and a piece of dark paper nearby though, because as you're doing this, you know, you get over these light areas, it's hard to tell what you have drawn over and what you haven't, but you run a piece of dark paper under there, pops right up. You can see what areas you have missed, what areas are still clear, and go back and kind of fill those in. Same for the dark. You start going over dark, you're going to lose track of where those edges are, how they come together. Slide a dark piece of paper. Midtones, you can slide any other color. Just having some of that around so that you can go back and double check. Because it's very easy to think you're doing an edge and then find out once you've shrunk it that, oh, there's a very clear area right there in the middle of my dark that now shows more obvious than I want it to. So going back and double checking on that, I spend a lot of time. It's kind of why I put them on this way. I just put one piece in the corner so I can just slide the piece in and out as I'm working. But yeah, that would be the full size of what the smaller one started out as too. So they
Probably
shrink.
be almost impossible to shrink them without a special oven if you went much larger.
Yeah, well,
Maybe a little.
I can do 3 of those size in the oven at a time.
Oh,
If I
In a
really.
regular oven, no, not like
Yeah.
a toaster.
No, not a toaster oven. No, I can only do about 1 at a time, half of 1 at a time in a toaster oven. But in a regular oven, really, my limiting factor is how fast I can get them out and flatten. Because even though they curl up and then flatten back out, there's often still a little bit of a wave to them. So I use, actually it's the cardboard that comes in the back of the paper. There tends to be a firm piece of cardboard. I just set it on that, put that in the oven. Because at that temperature, it's pretty low. Yeah, the single sheet's not so much, but in the toaster oven, I'm using a piece of cruddy mat board. Anything that's flat. Don't use corrugated cardboard. It will shrink, and when you press on it, you will get corrugated cardboard imprints, and you can see them. They're subtle, but you'll know they're there. Nobody else may know they're there, but in the nature of artist brain, you'll know they're there. So don't use anything with texture unless you want that texture to show.
Do you use a metal spatula or a silicone?
I use just a plastic one.
Okay.
Yeah, just mostly because as I'm taking it out pretty quick, setting it down, and then I'm using kind of my hand on top of the spatula. So with a plastic one, I don't burn myself.
You know what I think I did the last time is we had a toaster oven and it had a small little pan that came in it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I used to flatten it in my regular oven.
Okay.
That pan, that toaster oven
Yeah.
pan. And it was just the right size and it was smooth on the bottom and.
Yeah, the one that came in ours is a little wavy bottom, so I left it alone.
No.
But yeah, pretty much anything that's smooth and flat. They usually say try not to bake it on metal.
Oh.
And I've had a couple that turned out a little odd when I did that. I don't know if it's just because of how the heat's distributed, but so glass seems to be okay. The cardboard seems to be okay.
And I think I did mine on metal and it wasn't.
Okay.
a problem, so.
Yeah, and it may just have been me. And I had it happen a couple times and was just like, okay, maybe it's metal. Maybe it was I was using a cookie sheet and it still had cookie on it.
Sorry if you already said this. What kind of medium can you draw?
Colored pencil works nice. Ink is fine. So Sharpie, Micron, any permanent ink. I think at the Zoom somebody asked me about pastel. I've never tried pastel on it. It'd have to be something that either adheres well or is waxy enough to kind of shrink with
like
it.
an oil pastel maybe?
Maybe. Yeah. I don't have any oil pastel myself to really
Because they
experiment.
might
I wonder if that would be
become more
multi.
fluid. It probably would. It could create neat abstract ideas.
Yeah, you could get some kind of neat.
Well, he's quite the abstract artist.
Well, that's why I'm thinking, I would like to get a huge sheet and shrink it down to about this size.
Yeah. Yeah, that is the only annoying part. Is
I wonder if that, that Duralar, if you could, that, like Tracy buys that on a roll, I think, doesn't it?
Yeah, you can get that in big sheets.
If that would-
Massive oven.
Yeah, you need it,
Oh.
you'd have to go to a.
Wonder whether it was shrink.
baker
Never thought about
Commercial.
trying
Yeah,
that.
commercial
I've never
baker.
tried to shrink the Duralar.
Or a pizza parlor, or you,
Wood
wood fire pizza oven.
I wonder what the formulation of Dural, how different it is.
Yeah, I don't know. Apparently the formulation of this plastic is very similar to plastic milk jugs.
Oh,
Because some people, I found this out later after I was playing with it, they'd cut out the flat part on the plastic milk jug and draw on it and then shrink it.
oh,
And it comes up very similar.
funny.
Fun. So yeah, I don't know if there's a specific formulation to the plastic.
Some of the plastics you would want to know a lot about simply
Yeah.
because of the toxicity of
Some of
fumes.
them will
yeah.
release toxic fumes with shrubs, so yeah. Experiment in a well-ventilated area.
Or give me a call, I'll see if Jim knows. He used to work with polymers all the
Yeah.
time.
Is there any way to transfer the photo onto it?
The way I do it is like that, where I put the photo underneath and draw on it.
Oh, okay.
But you said you can send this through an inkjet?
You can't send this through. I have tried it, and the ink just smears through all those little scratches. But Grafix does make an inkjet printable shrink plastic. It's just not sanded. So I suspect you could probably print on it and then do some light sanding so you can kind of still see your lines maybe. But again, I haven't played with that yet.
Or you just use your inks.
Yep, or just, yeah, using ink on it would work fine too.
You can transfer a drawing like you would onto paper with a transfer. I mean, I did it
Okay.
because I didn't know any better.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I haven't tried that, so, yeah,
But-
probably some of the waxier
Yeah,
transfer paper.
yeah, the waxy transfer papers, probably not the ones that are more of a
Yeah,
pastel.
I know the carbon doesn't work, and charcoal,
Yeah,
'cause I kind of played with that. and
yeah, a lot of the
you
transfer
make a line,
paper,
and then as soon as you start moving your hand, there goes the line.
yeah, a lot of the transfer papers that I have are actually old dressmaker transfer, which was wax.
Yeah. So,
And so that works though.
It worked just like a pencil because it was it was wax like a pencil.
yeah, I could see that sticking to it.
So you could
too.
probably do the old transfer method where you turn your paper over and use the Prismacolor pencil itself on the back, redraw your lines from the back. I do a lot of my
Yeah.
drawing on tracing paper. Redraw your lines, from the back using heavy line of Prismacolor pencil and use
Yeah, and then-
transfer it that way probably would work
Yeah.
well.
Instead of
Yeah, I'm
I don't just
not
go
the
all over,
expert
I
on
just
this.
draw
I
heavy
play with it a
area
lot, but I
lines.
haven't
It's
found
easier
all
to
the
see the
things it
lines
can
on
do.
the other side.
I just like the little bitty details, so,
Mhm.
These are the two that I had done. Usually when I finish them, I like to mount them so that they kind of float, just because then I get the edges. That said, I have one at home that doesn't want to sit square, keeps shifting just a little bit in the frame, it's driving me nuts, so that one's probably gonna get rematted and put around the edges. But it's a good example, like in the beak on this and all the little feathers, you can see kind of what the details do. Where originally that was pretty wildly drawn. I didn't put a lot of time into doing the detail, versus this one where I did put more time into the little details of the leaves and some of the fur and.
It almost looks like it's done on a maroon colored paper.
Mhm.
Or and your black background is so solid black.
Yeah,
Really beautifully done.
Black is really black.
Yeah,
A
that's
lot of those
amazing.
colors, especially if you lay them down heavy, they stay that heavy, they get very dark. And black is one of those, so
Mhm.
See,
it
that's-
does a
it
nice
needs
job of
to-
making
like
black
in the beak,
background.
you can really see the fine line.
Goat, right?
Yep, yeah, it's a goat sticking its head through a fence.
Yeah,
That's kind of a good example of I put all my colors maybe a little too close together and then trying to find the right background. I couldn't get some of the contrast I really wanted, so it gets a little lost in there. That's kind of the basics of things.
Okay.
Other questions or? Gladly hand out some pieces to play with, and if you didn't bring pencils, I brought pencils. I also brought the Prismacolor art sticks, because they're really nice for filling in. That's really what I used on the puzzle piecey looking things to fill in the background, because it fills it pretty quick. If you want a half sheet, if you want a full sheet, if you want a half and a full sheet, if you want an entire pack, let me know. Yeah. So I figured I'll let you guys kind of play with it, get an idea.